guys, welcome to the Flower Files. Today we're going to do it a little bit different for our podcast, maybe more of a YouTube style. But I figure if I'm going to stand here today and talk to you about weeds, let's talk about weeds. So, kind of embarrassing to stand here because most people picture flower farming and flowers and farming in general being everything is perfect and everything is managed. But that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of hours, it takes a lot of infrastructure, it takes a lot of trial and error as well. So today what I wanted to do was show you things that have worked, places we've made mistakes, and let's talk through all of them because one thing I'm really good at growing is weeds. So Mother Nature does not like a blank slate. She definitely likes to make sure that every inch of the earth is covered in something that's growing, and that's great. What is growing tells you things about your soil, tells you things about your entire growing operation. It tells you everything that's happening in the ground. So let's take a quick look at some of the weeds that are actually growing here and figure out maybe what this is telling us. So right now, when I record this episode, it's early spring. So there's a lot of ground cover that you see. You can see we have some invasive clematis here. This has really taken off and it has just started to grow absolutely everywhere. You can see we have a little bit of, we have a little bit of thistle. And you can see some of it has already started to go to seed in a couple spots. And all of those guys just make more weeds. These have a pretty good thick root. You can see that we have the good old dandelion. There's very mixed review and feeling about dandelions. Yes, you can leave them for your pollinators, but they are tricky to sometimes pull out. There's a little bit of chicory here, sweetgrass, more dandelions. There's this weed. This is one of my least favorites because when you touch it, all of the seeds go everywhere. So how do you prevent weeds from coming up? There's a lot of different ways to do that. One of our favorites is we try to do as much suppression as possible. So today I'm really going to focus on how we get rid of weeds and how we suppress things. So if you take a look actually here, and you pull back the mulch, you can see underneath the mulch, we have some landscape fabric. There's a lot of different types and styles of landscape fabric. This one is a little bit thinner. It's much more fabric based than the plastic woven type because actually, if you look, you can see we have holes in this and we've planted in this. So to keep things looking aesthetically pleasing, because right over here to my right is one of our spaces where we have some classes and dinners and things like that. We want this to look nice. In doing that, we have created a space that is actually so much incredible maintenance. And that's kind of what inspired us for having this conversation today, because some of the things that are supposed to work actually sometimes can be a little more difficult. So let's take a look over here. Because if you spin around, you can see we have weeds that are now growing literally in the mulch on top of the fabric. We've got more of the clematis. Bindweed has started to come up. Some people call it morning glory. There's a couple different things. This is bindweed. This is actually ragweed at its earliest, youngest stage. More and more of the clematis that has just started to come up through the ground. You can see we've got mulberries with really thick roots that have started to come through. So, and we have a choke cherry that has started. We have a lot of different kinds of weeds, to be honest. So let's take a look at the perennials first, and then we're going to walk over and we're going to look at the annuals as well. I'm going to show you a couple different styles that we use to prevent weeds. So let's go take a look. So this is our little patch of culinary herbs that we have in this section. They're kind of broken up into a couple different spots. We have a couple varieties of mint. We have some lemon balm. We've played with chamomile. Chamomile has really great qualities, but sometimes we have found that feverfew does much better for us in vase arrangements than chamomile. That being said, in order to manage the perennial section, we've learned a lot. So this is the traditional woven fabric. This is plastic woven fabric. So it is really durable, but you can see if it starts to come apart, the weave will also come apart. So something like this, where clearly we use ground stakes. Okay, so these are ground stakes. You can find them online, Amazon. We'll include the link in the show notes. I honestly find that these work better after they've been in the ground a little bit because they get a little less slippery than when you first put them in. But this is what holds everything in place. You literally just pierce it. And then I use my, number 8s to push it the rest of the way down into the ground. You can see that this fabric is a different texture and style. This is more of a woven fabric. It functions differently, and the reason we use this is perennials don't like this type of fabric all the time. Perennials like to spread their wings and just keep growing. When you use this type of fabric for them to get started, it's a lot easier to make those holes a little bigger and give them the aeration that they need when it's opposed to this. Now, any fabric that you use, I'm not saying go to Joann's or Hobby Lobby or any of those places and say, I'm going to use purple fabric in my field. You want UV protected fabric. UV protected is critical because if you don't use that, I'll show you what happens in a whole other section here. We learned the hard way. It starts to come apart, and after a couple of years when you walk on it, it literally falls apart and becomes a mess. So you want UV protected. I love the DeWitt brand, DEWITT, DeWitt brand fabric. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it from a lot of different suppliers, but it's UV protected, comes in a variety of lengths and widths, so you can change the use for what you're using it for. It depends on what you actually need. So you've got woven fabric. This is our walk row fabric, and this we put down. You can see what happens if we don't have it down. You end up with weeds. You can also see where we have holes in it. If there's holes in it, seeds will find it and they end up growing weeds. It doesn't fail. Talking about your weeds and what they tell you, spring onions. If you have spring onions in your grass, if you have it in your garden beds, if you're seeing spring onions creeping up, it means you have a pH issue. If you add lime to your soil, you're going to change your pH, and these guys will actually stop growing. So this is a great indicator that you need to add lime to your soil. I'm glad it's just one in this section. Let's move on to another section of perennials where I can show you what it looks like and what happens when you don't have this kind of fabric. So I want to show you the difference because it's one thing to talk about it and it's another thing to actually see the difference. This is feverfew, also known as matricaria. Beautiful little white clusters with yellow centers. They look like tiny little daisies. They smell good. They've been used for years in herbal and medicinal. I am not one to tell you how to use it. I just know it's really pretty and we love using it. This is grown in the more traditional fabric feeling weed suppression. So if you look closely, you can see that there's a hole and the plant is planted right into it. Let's go look at the section where we planted it in landscape fabric, which is the plastic woven. Same plant, different patch, planted the same time. You can see the difference in the plants. They're struggling more, they're not as happy. They have been treated the exact same way, exactly. But they can't expand. They are so restricted. It's the same size hole, but that fabric allows a little more aeration. It allows a little more movement. It allows more water. It allows everything to move through it better than this fabric. So while this style of growing works perfectly for our annuals, which we'll walk over to and take a look at in a few minutes, it's not ideal for perennials. I didn't know that when I first started. Nobody told me that, hey, don't put your perennials in this fabric. We learned by making a mistake, and slowly over time, and lots of time, we have rebuilt the perennial beds to figure out which ones need fabric, which ones don't need fabric, which ones we should mulch, and which ones we can kind of just hope that they grow, because we also have some of those too. So I wanted you to actually see the difference. Let's take a look at the peonies, because they require a slightly different style as well. Welcome to the peony patch. We have a lot of peonies out here. There's a couple different rows, a couple different colors, a couple different bloom times. Everybody loves peonies. Peonies are a little finicky, and we tend to take a lot of extra time and care with them because they are such a specialty and high value crop for us. They absolutely want nothing to do with the heat that would be added to their roots in using any of the landscape fabric in their growing season. So with these guys, we take care of weeds with these a little bit differently. So let's take a look. So for our peony patches, what we do is to really do weed suppression. We actually use newspaper as our base layer. See, some things like to grow on top of it. Ground ivy is such a pain in the neck. But we put newspaper down first. There's a little bit of leaves. And then we cover everything with mulch. You can see it definitely works. So this is our youngest peony block. These are our smallest peonies. We actually cut their heads off this year. I felt very much like the Queen of Hearts off with their heads. So we had cut them back, and this was very early in the season. We didn't newspaper this section, and you can totally see the difference. So if you're wondering if it works, it actually really does work. How many pieces to use? We tend to use 2 to 3 pieces at least as a layer. If it's a really thick section of weeds, I'll leave it folded, or I'll have 2 or 3 pieces and kind of layer them and then put mulch on top. I don't have to use as much mulch, so it doesn't cost me as much. There are a lot of places that will donate newspaper to you for free. There's a lot of different sources I'm sure that you can find for free newspaper. When you're using newspaper, you don't necessarily have to worry about it leaching down into your soil either. Some people have asked questions about that, but we're working with flowers. I'm not worried about it getting pulled up into the plant or anything. So newspaper totally works out here. Let's go take a look at some of the annuals and look at the couple different growing styles in weed suppression that we use out there. So welcome to the annual section. This is our youngest patch of annuals that we have just literally put in the ground. This is DeWitt fabric. It is a 6-foot wide fabric. You can count the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet that are actually already marked out in the row for you, which is actually really helpful for keeping you straight, because apparently I have issues driving straight. So we use a form. We use a metal stencil to actually pre-form all of the holes, and we pre-burn. This is our 8th season with this fabric. So when they say it's durable and it holds up well, hands down, completely agree. This fabric has been driven on by tractors, walked on for literally years between the rows as they grow up. Things have been pulled through them. We've put rebar in and taken it out. It's been frozen and cooked in the heat. It is a workhorse. Now, is it perfect? No. And I know there is some debate about how if you use this, maybe the soil underneath isn't getting as much aeration as it could get. But that's why you have crop rotation. And that's why we're very strategic in where we put things inside the fence, outside the fence. Amendments are so important for your soil. All of that matters. So we start with this. This really, really helps with weeds. I know there are people who show all kinds of styles of using a hoe and using all kinds of other types of weed work. It doesn't work for us. I've tried, and I have spent too many years with weeds literally over my head in August to not be able to rely on this. We have also tried cornstarch fabric. I have a black plastic mulch layer. I refuse to use the traditional fruit and vegetable plastic where it's just one cycle and it comes up out of the field and gets thrown away. So we were using the cornstarch. It's absolutely wonderful, but it biodegrades. And if you're trying to get it out of the field at the wrong time because you're trying to flip your field over, for us, it wasn't breaking down in enough time for me to be able to rototill it in, and it kind of threw some of our crop rotation on top of the fact that the walk rows, I still was putting fabric down. So it was a little bit more work and it just wasn't working as well, and it ripped super easy. So this has become our standard here on the farm. So these have been planted. This is status. This has been planted for about 2 weeks now out of their trees. Let's take a walk over to the section where we have them a different crop, but it's a little bit larger, and then I want to show you an end crop as well. So let's go take a walk over here. Okay, so here's another block of our annuals. This section is obviously larger than our newest block that we've put in. These are about a month or two ahead of what we've just planted over there. You can see the growth in this actually is not as consistent as I would like to see. You can see we have some that have really great growth, and then you have some that haven't grown well at all, and some that are completely missing. So this is where this fabric becomes really important, because if I didn't have this fabric, this whole section would have no plants, and it would be that much harder for us to control the weeds. So although it's not ideal, it definitely does help. I do not think it is because of the fabric that it is not growing well. If I'm looking at this was clearly planted too deep, and the plant is trying to push its way through. This one, I have no idea what happened with this. I actually just broke the center off of that, but it's got some kind of weird thing happening with the crown too. And this one is just completely gone. Completely gone. There's nothing there. So don't know what happened, but you can see this is calendula. If you're not familiar with it, it's getting ready to flower here. And in another podcast, we talk a lot about edibles. Calendula was one that we chatted about in that one specifically. So this is what calendula looks like when it's just getting ready to bloom. Two more things I want to show you. I want to show you what it looks like when you have a fully planted patch that is completely filled in and is full and beautiful, and what people expect to see on a flower farm. And then we're going to flip to another section where we use actually a little bit of straw to have some weed suppression amongst the dahlias. So let's take a look at a section that's probably a little more exciting. Come with me. Okay, so when somebody says flower farm, this is probably what they're anticipating seeing. I'll be honest, if I'm going with the Goldilocks theory of too tight, just right, too far, we've got a lot of all of that mixed in here. But that's a topic for a different day. In looking at this and making sure that we have weed suppression so that we don't have to pick weeds or stick our hands accidentally into thistle as we're cutting, this is what a finished field that is full of flowers tends to look like. So if you look at this, you can see, we're going to zoom in down here. You can see that it is just the plant. It has started to shade out everything else. So that's why there's no more germination happening. So if you look all in here, you can see it's just the plant. It is a little dry this spring, so you're going to notice our soil does have a fair amount of clay that we're constantly amending and working with. But this is what your end product looks like when you're using this type of fabric. Nice and clean, super simple. As we go to take this crop out and rotate to the next one, all of the infrastructure comes out. The plant gets taken out or cut off. And then honestly, we assess to see if we can plant back into that or if the fabric needs to be completely removed. And then we amend the soil and put the fabric back down. Your walk rows definitely show compaction after, but it makes sense because they're walk rows. You're going to be moving up and down them. So great style of growing, super easy for weed suppression. We even have fabric out on the ends here so that it's not just ending where here is, and I don't have to mow quite so close and possibly suck up anything into the blades. Let's take a look at the dahlias. So welcome to one of our dahlia patches. Early spring here in Maryland, our dahlias are a little on the small side, but they're probably larger than other folks would anticipate. This block of dahlias actually stayed in the ground through the season. So you can see we actually have some growth. The patch in the back where the girls are currently working, we actually are planting another round of dahlias. So weed suppression for these is a little tricky. Dahlias hate the heat. They don't want anything to do with the heat. This plant will grow nice, lush, big, and full. It'll just start to come into flower, and July hits. It gets hot, and they go, oh, we don't like this. So we come through and we cut everything down to about 2 feet above the ground level to help cool things off. We also tend to strip off bottom leaves as well, helping the plant not to have to sustain as much of a canopy. Doing that means that there's lots of exposed soil, which means we can also have a lot of weeds. We've tried growing dahlias in cornstarch fabric. We've tried growing them with newspaper. We've tried growing them in the traditional black fabric. What works best to help them stay cool for us is adding straw as a mulch on top. This is just regular bales of straw, and we put it on thick enough so that you can see it's covering your soil and not allowing any of that sun, soil, seed contact to take place. One thing I will say about working with straw, make sure you get good quality straw, because straw is not just straw. Some straw can have seed heads left in it, and if that happens, all of a sudden you have a wheat field. You don't want that, because now you've created an even bigger mess for you to have to deal with. So get good quality straw that does not have seed heads in it, that you know doesn't have weed seeds and things like that in it. So you're not making your problem bigger, you want less weeds. I think that covers all of the different types of weed suppression that we use. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube if that's where you're watching. Give us a like on any of your players. You've got all the different podcast players. We would love a thumbs up or a Google review or anything that helps us as we continue to grow. Thank you for listening. And if you have questions, shoot them our way. I'd love to chat further. And if you have a suggestion, we'll definitely take that too. Bye, guys.